Hey everybody, today I want to show you how to start working with value and pattern in applied lines. To get started, you're going to need this worksheet, and what I've done is I've gotten a fresh blank page in my sketchbook, and I'm going to take a little bit of tape and tape it down. Do not tape, like, in other words, don't take your tape and put it like that and put it behind, because it creates bumps and that might affect your drawing. So instead, just, it's okay if the tape goes over the corners. Just tape your corners down like so. And then obviously you're going to write your name up here in the top right hand corner, just in case. All right, so let's get started. I'm using, to do this today, a kind of fountain pen where you have to dip the ink in to make it work. So grab some ink and make sure my pen is working. Looks like everything's good, so I'll write my name. All right, let's get started. So, definitions here. Explicit lines. Explicit lines are simply stated lines, or just that. They're clear, obvious lines. And usually when you're looking at like comic book drawings or just like outlines or things like that, that's something with a clear, obvious line. So if I was to use a clear, obvious line to draw a square, I would simply just do something like this, right? That is an explicit line. This is also obviously an explicit line, and that's an explicit line. That's not to say that you can't get fancy with these lines. Like if I wanted to come in here and, you know, make this line thicker or something like that, I could totally do that. Okay. Now over here, implied lines are different. Implied lines are where you have an edge another way of looking at it is the line is not visible. So how do you make a line without making a line, right? Well, let me show you. So if I was to make a square down here, and I don't consider this cheating, I think this is actually working smarter. I'm going to start with a number 2 pencil, and I'm going to make a very, very, very light drawing. You can barely even see that, and you probably can't even see that in the video, which is good. And I think I'll use a simple hatch, and I'll come down here and draw this line. And this is a concept known as closure. It's a psychological concept where our mind forces us to see a line that's not actually there. So in this particular case, you put the whole thing together. That's a concept called Gestalt. I put all these lines together, and somehow my mind reads this as a square, and it sees this as an edge. It sees this as a line. So that's an implied line. Obviously, if I do the same thing with a circle, so I'm going to draw a very, very light circle with a number 2 pencil, and I can come in here with, like, say, a squiggle, and just squiggle this around, and before I know it, I have myself a pretty obvious circle, right? Okay. But again, no obvious outline, it's an edge. So triangle, same deal. You know, you decide what kind of methodology you want to use to make the triangle. But if I decided to just simply stipple, that's where you use all those tiny little dots. An edge, so I'm not going to actually draw it, but obviously I can already see the line, and if I just go ahead and fill this all in, I see a triangle made out of dots instead of obviously a line making it. That is implied lines. I can show you some examples of implied lines where if you want something to look more realistic, typically speaking, if you're drawing a person, unless you want them to have kind of a more cartoony style, which is a style, again, there's nothing wrong with it. So here's a great example of an image that has very explicit and obvious lines to it. It's a beautiful drawing, so there's absolutely nothing wrong with explicit edges, but clearly those are explicit. Whereas this is a great example of a drawing with implied line where, as you can see, the actual edges kind of disappear. Implied lines. All right, so once we have this, lightness and value, let's go over and talk about those definitions. Value is basically the lightness and darkness. dealing with lightness and darkness. And it can be of an object, of the surroundings, of everything, but it's dealing with the lightness and darkness in a work of art. Pattern is, and I'll peel that off so you can see that word. Pattern is repetition. And sometimes people say of a decorative design, it could be decorative, it doesn't have to be, but repetition, you could say repetition of an element. So repetition, and usually like it's in a predictable way. So in other words, if I draw a design here, so I'm going to make this lovely kind of swirly design. If I keep making that swirly design over and over again, that's me repeating that swirly design. And in the process, I am creating a pattern of a swirly design. Simple, you know, so that's a pattern. And repetition can be anything. So as long as you are taking something and repeating it, you are just by default making a pattern. So if I make 4 lines and then I make 4 lines in this direction and then I do it again over here, and I just keep going with this in different directions, and they don't all have to be always in the same direction. I'm going to rotate my page so I don't get ink on my hands when I do this. That again is creating a pattern. Okay, and again, so the goal here, and I'm not going to finish doing all 4 of these, come up with 4 different examples of a pattern. And honestly, it could be any kind of basic shape you use. So, you know, if you decide to use a triangle and repeat the triangle over a square or a letter or whatever, that is you creating a pattern. So create a shape and just keep repeating it. Cross hatching is a pattern, stippling is a pattern, because it's repeating a decorative design over and over and over again. So I'll let you figure that out on your own. Moving right along, here we go. This is going to lead into our next project. You're going to use 1 pattern on each box, got 2 boxes here, to create different areas of value, like the box on the left. So you can see only use implied lines. So in other words, if I decide to do cross hatching here, what I'm not going to do is draw a line here, draw a line here, draw a line here, even though I have these lines just as guides for you. Instead, I'm going to create a hatch like this, and I'm going to make this one really dark, and in the process the line will go away and I'll end up with an implied line. And here's the trick. So that's that one side. If I create this area over here, again, just by doing that, that implies the line between this spot and this spot. And what I've discovered is that obviously if I make it lighter on this side, so just by doing that, I'm creating that edge between this spot and this spot. But up here, if I have something, it's going to look a little bit confusing, so I'll show you what I do. You go in a different direction, first of all, that's important. Keep this one nice and light, so I definitely show where the edge of the shape is. But then what I can also do is I can create maybe another hatch going in this direction. And then I think I'll add another hatch over here. So I definitively have 3 completely different types of value there. Okay, so that's the goal, is to create 2 different types of pattern here. What you're not going to do is just draw a line around it. So I'll let you finish that up on your own, but that is implied line using value and pattern in a nutshell for you.